Welcome back to another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video. In this video I'm going to talk about how to take a Death Rattle sub-segment within your army and to make it competitive and in my opinion hard as nails. So I'm going to talk about this in kind of two different segments. First I'm going to talk about with purely GW made currently produced models, how you can take your skeleton warriors, add a few other units and make them really good. And then I'm going to add in some units that are currently retired by GW, so they're still playable within the game, but they're not currently produced. But there are good alternatives out there, or you can custom build your own. And actually, in the first subsegment, if you want to run them exactly as I recommend, you will have to either buy out of production models or scratch build, convert your own. But I'll show you a few examples of my own that I've done for that you can do for really cheap, and I'll give you links in the description below to an example website for some of the other units that you may not necessarily want to convert. They would be more difficult, that you can buy really good alternatives that fit in well with the GW models, that look really good, in my opinion actually better than the retired GW models, and are price wise comparable to what GW currently sells on like a model by model basis, and cheaper than what you can buy the out of production models for in the secondary market. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So playing with purely the models that are currently in production by GW to kind of build this core engine for this really hard Death Rattle group, you need a White King, preferably on horseback with his totem. So he has to be the sword and shield one, which is good. The shield is a good benefit. The sword has really good upper end damage potential. And he's an all-around solid model. He has a really good commander ability. You can pick a Death Rattle unit. Please note, especially for later in the video, it's Death Rattle keyword. That's hugely important. He can pick any one Death Rattle unit. They add +1 attack to all their weapons until your next hero phase. Please also note that does not say in the combat phase. It says their attacks. So that applies to shooting and all, which again we'll talk about later. But anyways, you need a White King, preferably on horseback, preferably with the banner to truly put this at its maximum potential. You need a Necromancer, again, preferably on horseback, because the horses are free. The icon, for example, with the White King is free. It adds extra attacks, it adds mobility, it makes your units better. And these units you're typically not going to want to stick them in combat unless you absolutely have to, because their buffs are so useful and they just boost the combat effectiveness of your regular battle line troops. I'm sorry. Battle line is actually a technical term. Your regular just infantry or cavalry troops that you're going to use, they're so beneficial that you typically don't want them in combat. They can move around quickly. They can put these buffs where they need to be. The horse is an excellent option. So bring it. It's free. Just spend the extra time and effort to convert it, or the little bit extra money to buy it. And then you need a big unit of obviously skeleton warriors. You can do this with obviously Graveguard, and they're really good too, but in larger numbers, skeletons are better than Graveguard. Yes, Graveguard automatically have 2 attacks, but they're a 1 wound model. You get half as many of them for the same price as you do skeletons, so you're getting half as many wounds on the table. Their save is a little bit better, but not by much. And what I'm going to show in this video, that's really almost irrelevant. And the way that you can buff these skeletons up, a model by model basis, the skeleton's offensive capability will be so much greater than the Graveguard that I think that they far outweigh the positives that the Graveguard brings over a skeleton warrior. Plus, they regenerate more. The Graveguard only regenerate D3. Skeleton warriors regenerate D6. So that aside, you need a large unit of skeleton warriors. You can bring other things. You can bring Black Knights. I don't recommend it. I actually highly recommend you don't. I think Black Knights are utterly worthless Some people try to make the arguments that with a bunch of different buffs and in the perfect storm kind of conditions, offensively they can be powerful. Sure, whatever. But in the second half of this video, I'll explain a much better option that you can do for similar points that fits even better into the combos of this. Some people say they're good tar pit units for their points. Zombies and skeletons do it better in terms of actually keeping things pinned, with the ability to run as well as move your regular distance, and the ability to generate up to 12 inches on a charge. Even slow units like skeletons and zombies can get across the battlefield quite quickly. A lot of scenarios allow you to deploy relatively close to the center of the board. If you understand deployment, which is very important in Age of Sigmar, that's really not a big issue. There's other units that are fast that can also tie things down. So if you're needing to move around the battlefield quickly to respond to something, dire wolves are honestly, in my opinion, a better option. Less points, do an even better job. All that aside, wouldn't recommend them. You can bring them, but it's a waste, in my opinion. So we have that core. And so the big thing is here, when you bring skeletons, I'm going to recommend you bring a squad of 40. And I know that's potentially quite expensive because you're going to have to buy 4 boxes of skeletons. Or if you're smart, just go on eBay. You can buy skeleton warriors dirt cheap. I have about 60 or 70, and I think I paid somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 bucks for all of them. And they were all pre-built and pre-painted. I changed a lot of them up, repainted them all myself because, I'm sorry, they weren't all pre-painted. Most of them weren't painted. Painted them all up myself because that's what I want. Even if they were painted amazingly, like Golden Demon winning level, I'd still want to paint them because that's a big part of why I do this hobby. But anyways, you're going to want to bring 40 skeletons. Better to bring them with spear and shield than sword and shield because you're bringing a larger unit and you want the extra guys to be able to be within combat range here. Your White King probably should be your general. You can do, of course, the Necromancer, but you lose some of the synergy of this unit. So I'd recommend the White King. So the goal here is you want to keep your White King pretty close to your skeletons, preferably within range of the Deathless Minion's ability. The horse helps do that because he's so quick that even if he's not charging into combat and skeleton warriors are, that horse allows him to stay close to them even if they're getting off that charge. Necromancer, similar kind of thing. So you have your skeleton warriors, 40 of them. Whenever you have 10 skeleton warriors or less, you get 1 attack each. At a 5-up, 4-up, no rend, 1 damage each, not particularly impressive. However, if you have 20 or more of them, that bumps up to 2 attacks each. 30 or more of them, 3 attacks each. This is why you want to bring 40, because if you lose even 1 and you have 30 in your squad, you've suddenly dropped from 3 attacks each to 2. 40 allows you to lose up to 11. At that 11th one, you drop down from 3 attacks each to 2. So you've got some leeway. You can take some casualties, either in close combat because you didn't get to attack first, or from enemy shooting, or magic, or whatever else. It gives you a little bit of built-in flexibility. It's a good thing. Remember, you're also regenerating D6 models every single turn during your hero phase if you brought a totem banner icon. Worth doing. Also worth bringing a horn blower. Helps them on the charge. These things don't cost anything. Always include them because they're free and the benefits are worth it. So you've got all that. If they're within range of a death hero, they get +1 to their attack value, so they go from a 5-up, 4-up to a 4-up, 4-up. It's their to hit roll. So you've substantially increased them from a 1 in 3 chance of hitting, followed by a 50% chance of wounding, which all together is basically a 1 in 6 chance of actually hitting and wounding, to a 50% followed by 50%, so roughly a 1 in 4, so 25% chance of each attack from each model successfully hitting and wounding, roughly. So whenever you bring all these together and you have your White King as your general, his command ability is pick a Death Rattle unit, add +1 to all of its attacks. Skeletons only have, or I'm sorry, to all attacks with its weapons. So, like, you either have a spear or a sword. That's the only attack you get with a skeleton, so you're going to 1 more attack. So for 10 or less, you're now at 2 attacks each. For 20 down to 10, for 20 or more, you are now at 3 attacks each instead of 2, and for 30 or more, you are now at 4 attacks each instead of 3. Pretty good. The Necromancer is there because his special spell, Van Hell's Dance Macabre, I believe it's how it's pronounced, allows you to pick a unit within certain keywords, but the skeletons or Death Rattle, it's either skeleton or Death Rattle, they fit under it, and so now you can choose that unit and you can pile in and attack twice. So with all the potential benefits on this skeleton unit, you're going to be piling in and attacking twice, so for a grand total of up to a 6-inch pile in with both the times, and 8 attacks each at 4 up, 0 rend, 1 damage each. That's quite absurd. You can mow things over very easily. In the last game I played where I actually got to use this, I destroyed a very large unit of Marauders, Chaos Warriors, with this squad, and then took down a chariot with them, a Gorbeast chariot. Had some Chaos Knights hiding in a corner trying to avoid them, had enemy heroes running for their life, because these guys were basically unstoppable. Now that's all the offensive potential of this unit. Another big thing about this is, this very large squad, if you're keeping the Necromancer nearby, helps keep him alive because every time he takes a wound or mortal wound, and once you failed his saves, so you can take the Deathless Minions one and his armor save if applicable, you roll a die on a 4-up, he can choose another death unit to take the wound for him. So he can throw those onto the skeletons if he needs to. They have to take it as a mortal wound, but they can also take their Deathless Minion save against it, so a potential 5-up or 6-up save. It just gives you one more layer of saves to keep him alive, and to potentially just negate the wound outright. In addition to that, if you're bringing the icon with that White King, which again is free, so you should do it, every time a death unit loses its final wound, roll a die. On a 6-up, it ignores the wound or mortal wound that would have killed it. Skeletons are a 1-wound model each, so every time they take a regular wound, they can take their standard save, which is going to be a 5-up or a 6-up, or non-existent if there's rend. Then they can take their Deathless Minion save, and again, if it's a mortal wound, you just skip step 1 on this. Then they take their Deathless Minion save, which is either a 5-up or a 6-up, depending on what commander abilities you picked. Then once they've gone through that, if both those fail, then they get, again, against mortal wounds or regular wounds, another 6-up to keep them alive. So you have potentially 3 layers of saves for your skeletons. Another important thing to note is, if you're using your Necromancer, and he fails his saves, and he successfully gets that transfer the wound to a mortal wound to another death unit, and they fail their Deathless Minion save, they get to take this totem save there as well. So they have 2 potential chances to ignore that wound again. And this also applies to the heroes. It also applies to him because he is a death unit within range of himself. That's already been stated in FAQ. But that extra totem save for heroes is less useful because it only applies to their final wound, so you don't get to use it as often. But because skeletons, again, are a 1-wound unit, 1-wound models each, that's that 3rd level of save. It's really good. It definitely adds to their survivability. So this combination of these 3 kinds of units, these 3 units that you're bringing on the table, the really big squad of skeletons, the White King, and the Necromancer, all together have a very strong offensive and defensive potential. And they're really not that expensive, points-wise. The White King is 120, the Necromancer is 120, the skeletons are 80 for 10. So if you're bringing 40 of them, it's 320 points. In a 1,000 point game, that's going to be all together a little bit over half. Anything bigger than that, it's not that big of a deal. Chunk out of your army, and that's one of your battle line right there. Again, it's expensive if you're considering for your battle line, but especially for death. But if you're wanting to build this really strong sub-segment within your army, this really kind of hard point within your list, you can't go wrong. But that's everything within what's currently being produced by GW. Now I'm going to take it up a notch in terms of nasty, and throw in a few Tomb Kings models. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I don't want you to break the bank or make you spend too much time looking for alternate models or converting of models. I know some places unfortunately frown on those, on either or both. I'm fortunate enough that my local GW does not care either way, and all the other local shops that I play at, again, don't care so long as it's clear what they are and there's not any kind of redundancy of, well, this model is both a skeleton archer and a skeleton warrior, and to where it can confuse the opponent. As long as it's clear, everyone's okay with it locally. So the first thing that you're going to want to bring, and I'm actually putting these in reverse order of importance in my opinion, is skeleton archers. They're a 5-up, 4-up, no rend, 1 damage each, 1 attack each. Relatively unimpressive. 100 points for 10 of them. Not too expensive. The big thing is you want to bring 20 or more of them in a squad because they get 2 attacks each instead of 1. So you're doubling the ability of each one of them. So that's 40 attacks. If there's no enemies within 3 inches of them that they're shooting in a turn. It's pretty good. They also have the ability to run in a turn and shoot, which is abnormal. If they bring a horn blower, again, it's free, do it. If they bring a totem, they restore D6 models every hero phase. Again, it's free, do it. So they have some potential good abilities. Now, whenever you combine them with your White King, and let's say that you're not going to be in close combat that turn, and you know it, then you just throw his extra attack with each of their weapons onto this unit, because it doesn't specify that it has to be in the combat phase, and you're doing that in the hero phase. So you're bumping these guys up from 2 shots each to 3 shots each, because you're going to bring 20 or more of them, and you're just raining down a little bit more death on your enemy, but not pun not intended, before they get into close combat. They're not amazing, but death doesn't have any shooting outside of Tomb Kings, any real shooting. And that little bit of whittling down can help this kind of core engine that I've already explained even more. So they're good. Don't overlook them. They're relatively cheap. If you don't want to convert the models or buy the overly outrageously expensive models that are out of production on the secondhand market, I would highly, highly, highly recommend the Reaper Bones miniatures. I believe they're called the Skeleton Guardian Archers. I'm actually going to put the link down below to them. Reaper is a great company. Now, if you're not familiar with the Bones line, Bones is a resin material. I think that on skeletons, because they're not highly, highly detailed, that honestly that they come out with the detail is fine on them. It is a more flexible, soft, kind of rubbery in the sense of like how malleable it is material. If you get them and they're kind of bent out of shape, you can just heat up water to near boiling. It doesn't have to be that hot, it just needs to be quite hot. Dip them in it for a few seconds, and either A, they'll straighten out by themselves, or if they don't, you can actually bend them and reshape them yourself, and then immediately put them under cold water, and they'll harden again to their regular amount of hardness and hold that shape. So they're very reposable. Converting them is really easy in terms of just changing the position slightly. They're really cheap compared to like other kinds of companies that sell like really small model counts. I think that for a group of like 3 of them, again, I think it's something like $5, $4 or $5 for them. So to bring a squad of 20, you're obviously gonna end up with 21 of them, but big whoop. But I'm gonna put the link down below for you. Reaper's a good company. I've never had any problem with them. They're actually local to me. It's like a 40-minute drive to their location, but I've bought both online and in person from them, and they've always been quite pleasant to deal with. They do offer free shipping, I believe, if your order exceeds $30, so they're pretty reasonable. And then after that, we move on to the Tomb Herald. Again, take him on a horse. It's free. Do it. He's faster. Gets more attacks in close combat. It's worth it. He moves 12 inches on that horse as opposed to 4. So he's much faster. The big things here are, number 1, He can take wounds for any death hero within 3 inches of him. Don't have to roll for it. They fail their saves, however many they've got. He jumps in front and then gets to take it as mortal wounds, so he can take his Deathless Minion saves, which he will get because, number one, he's a hero, so he's within range of himself. Number two, he's going to be within range of whatever other death hero that he's taking the wounds for. So he's going to have Deathless Minion save regardless, so he's going to get some kind of save against the mortal wound. So if you're bringing this core that I've suggested, he's making that White King much more survivable than he already is, which is pretty survivable for a 5 wound model. In addition, he's no slouch in combat. His stats in combat are 4 attacks each, a 3-up, neg 1, with 1 damage. It's not terrible. He's only 100 points. He also has the ability to plant his totem, which does not require that he has not moved in that hero phase, but it does state that he cannot move again until your next hero phase. But when he does that, every Death Rattle unit within 24 inches immediately restores 1 slain model. That's huge with regular skeleton warriors or your skeleton archers that you're bringing in your army. Suddenly they are recovering D6 plus 1 models every hero phase if they're within range of this guy. You probably don't want to put him in combat. He's not terrible, but again, you're bringing him to help be part of this kind of heroic buff engine that's taking these skeleton warriors from pretty good to incredible whenever they're all functioning together as cogs in this machine. Again, he's only 100 points. He has those multiple benefits. He's well worth bringing. Now we get to what, in my opinion, is the nastiest part of this. I know you're thinking, wow, even nastier than the big old unit of skeletons. Yes. Now, no, they're not going to deal out as much damage, but this unit's faster, not particularly fast for cavalry, but much faster than the regular skeletons. And this is another reason why you're going to want to bring your White King, your Necromancer, and your Tomb Herald on horses. And that is the Macropolis Knights. Now, again, this is an out-of-production model. I haven't found an alternative that I really, really like. That's another company's model that I think, oh, that's perfect. Mantic does make these new kind of sea serpent models that are shape-wise similar to the old Necropolis Knights, which you can buy those. I'll link those below. It would clearly take some converting. You'd have to at least change out the rider or do something with them to make them look kind of undead. But that's an option. Or you can do what I've done, and again, I'll show this as well as all the other converted models at the end that I've done that I think is a relatively inexpensive way to do it with GW models to make a good stand-in version of your own that will clearly not be anything else in your army. So the big thing is the Macropolis Knights, they're tough. They're 5 wound models each. They're undercosted quite drastically right now at 160 points for 3. In offense, they're good. In close combat, they're a 4-up save. Against ranged attacks, it's 5-up, big whoop. Then they can also benefit from the Deathless Minions. The super important thing is they also have the Death Rattle keyword. They always charge 6 inches or more if they have their Hornblower, which again, you're taking, it's free. Do it. You return 1 of them each turn automatically in your hero phase because that's what their icon does. Their attacks in close combat, they have 2 attacks with the Rider's Weapon, a 3-up, neg 1 for 1 damage. So good, they have Rend. Not a lot of these units do in your army, and in this kind of like core engine. And then their mount makes 3 attacks at a 4-up, 3-up, neg 1 for D3 damage. And every time you roll a 6 on the to wound rolls, they generate a mortal wound on top of that D3. So you're doing the D3 damage plus a mortal wound for each 6 you've rolled on the to wound rolls for the mount. It's pretty good. Now, why is this particularly nasty with this? You may have already guessed it. They're Death Rattle, they're skeleton, so they meet the requirements for both the White King and the Necromancer, so you can cast the White King's command ability on them, making their rider suddenly do 3 attacks instead of 2, and their mount do 4 attacks instead of 3. So instead of doing 5 attacks each, they're doing 7 attacks each, so in a squad of 3, they're actually doing 21 attacks, and I think the commander actually generates an additional attack with his spear, so 22 attacks. It's pretty good. Then you have Van Hale's Dance Macabre, which again works on them, so they can pile in and attack twice if you'd like. Their cavalry, they're pretty quick in terms of like with the guaranteed 6-inch charge, potentially further, and they're not super fast for cavalry, but they're much faster than the skeletons. So for this kind of group, they're fast. They're powerful. They take an absolute beating because they're 5 wound models each. And then whenever you throw in the Tomb Herald, they're not recovering 1 model per turn, they're recovering 2. If the banner dies for whatever reason, maybe you inadvertently put wounds on that model without thinking about it, you can return that model with the icon, so you're regenerating models again. That way it's just an additional failsafe. They heal faster that way. Like, all of this together, they're offensively quite powerful. They're relatively, again, for this kind of subgroup in your army, they're relatively quick, and they're defensively very, very, very hard to move. You've got the 2 saves against every wound, and then again on their final wound, they gain access to the additional 6-up to prevent their final wound because of the White King's standard ability. So, all that being said, like, if you're willing to dip your toes into the Tomb Kings to bring a couple of Death Rattle units over, 3 of them actually, 2 units and a hero, you can really take this kind of engine of Death Rattle up several more power levels in terms of its effectiveness. I used this group within a, I believe, 1,500 point army. Also brought a Mortis engine. Also brought zombies. Also brought Vargeist in a local tournament or local event recently. We had a 4-player 4-way matchup with a special scenario that had recently come out, I believe, in a White Dwarf. And it did well. I won the event. The points for it were 4-2 to 1-0. And in combat, it was very, very one-sided. I lost very little of the army by the end of it, and the army performed quite well, which you would expect. Multiple levels of saves on all those Death Rattle units. All these buffs that you apply wherever you most need it to offensively be quite powerful, and all. So before I end, I real quickly wanted to talk about how you can gain access, because none of the heroes on horseback are currently available by GW, and the Macropolis Knights are also not available currently by GW, and I don't want to try to say, hey, you know, to run this really good list, you need to go buy these out of production models and pay 3 to 4 times the original retail value, which is absurd. So don't do that. So I'm starting with the White King. And I'll explain how I made these and suggest how you can do it for cheap. So this White King that I'm currently painting, that I converted up, again, I don't know how well you can see him, the camera is pretty bad. He is quite simply made from the horse from a Black Knight set, which if you've bought the Start Collecting set or a Black Knight box, you've got that. You can use the legs again from the Black Knight. I didn't use those, but that's a good option. And then he's also made with bits from the Skeleton Warriors box set, such as the sword, the shield on his back, and then the arm holding the banner. The banner is actually, I believe, an old Empire icon. I bought it from a local shop's kind of like bits box. And actually the legs of him are also from that. Has a little skeleton on the base that's dead underneath his horse, just to add a little bit more character, help distinguish him, help kind of show, hey, this is a significant unit. To make the horse rearing back like this is really simple. Just cut the back legs off the horse where they connect, shift them down a little bit. You may need to file them or smooth them out a little bit, but then you can just re-glue them on with plastic glue. GW's plastic glue is pretty good in terms of its strength. Holding it, and you've suddenly converted a relatively plain looking unit that looks like your Black Knights with maybe not a whole lot of difference, because you can actually make a banner or icon, again, from the Black Knight set or the Skeleton Warrior set. They have icons and banners that you can convert up or change up to look slightly different. It makes the model stand out a bit more and look, you know, more like an actual commander unit. Secondly, I have this one that I'm working on. He's not as far along in terms of paint, but I'm really proud of the model so far. I put a lot of time and effort into creating him, so he's very much a scratch built model, and I upsized the base to kind of put everything on I wanted. My mounted Necromancer. Can't see him particularly well, but if you're on either the local DFW Age of Sigmar group that I run, or I will be posting this on the PMP on Google Plus once I'm done painting it, and the Death Grand Alliance group on Facebook, and the Warhammer YouTubers group also on Facebook. I'm a Necromancer here. He's a old Empire Battle Wizard base. I believe that's where the staff comes from. And this little hourglass comes from. The hand holding an hourglass is actually from the Spirit Host. The cape on the back is, I believe, Manfred von Karstein's from the Mortarch set, cut down a little bit. He has extra skeleton heads cut in half and filed down to be like shoulder guards. The horse, I believe, is an old Empire horse as well that I'd also bought. I have a skeleton warrior that I've kind of carved up and halfway buried to be remains down there, and a blood reaver who has been impaled with 2 daggers and an arrow, who he is resurrecting back to life on the front of the base. Real simple conversion for him. Just cut the axe out of his hand, laid it there on the ground as if he had dropped it when he died. Just cut him at the waist and then repositioned him and glued it down to make it where he's kind of lifting himself up off the ground. You can obviously still buy an Empire Battle Wizard. You can buy old like Bretonnian and Imperial Knights for dirt cheap online on eBay. To use like a rider, like the lower half of a rider and the horse. You can convert relatively easy from some of the kits like the Mortis engine or the Necromancer kit as well, if you'd rather, or even skeletons. I've seen a lot of people do really cool kind of Lich inspired Necromancers. There's plenty of options you can use. You can again use your Black Knights as a base for your horse and your rider and all to make a suitable Necromancer mounted option. That's just the one I did. And then we go to our Tomb King models. Again, this is a Black Knight base. This is my Tomb Herald. Can't see him particularly well. I gave him a horn because, interestingly enough, the skeleton that is the Tomb Herald has nothing to blow or to announce that someone important has arrived, and that's what a herald does. He's a skeleton. I imagine he can't talk. So I was like, you don't seem particularly effective as a herald. So I'm assuming that magically, or they can just kind of like somehow funnel the wind through the horn to do it like all the other horns do in Death, to be an appropriate herald. I made a little icon for him just out of extra bits. I bought a Corsair kit or whatever it is from the Dark Elves. I used them as the base for my Grave Guard. Here's an example one. Again, don't know how you can see it. Just kind of put a skeleton head on him, convert up the body slightly. Anyways, but I had the icon extra. It fits the theme of my army. It's dragon themed. My leader is Lady Sinessa, the Dragon Queen. So I use their serpent. I'm going to try to add some wings to it at some point to make it look more dragon-like. Just added some skulls kind of hanging from that at the bottom to kind of help differentiate the icon. Slap the shield on his back, make him look a little bit different. I don't run Black Knights. I'm going to paint him up a little bit differently, maybe do some more work on the base to make this stand out a bit more as a Tomb Herald, but relatively inexpensive conversion for a Tomb Herald. And then we have my Macropolis Knights. I've never been a big fan of the Tomb Kings. I don't mind the whole kind of pseudo-Egyptian look. I just don't really like the way it was implemented on much of the models. Don't really want to pay 2-3 times regular retail value for these kinds of things on the secondhand market. So I've always liked the demigryphs. So I bought some demigryphs secondhand, but you can buy them. They're still in production. Took the original rider legs and the demigryph. Took actually the original chest plate, but you can also use Black Knight or other skeleton ones. Substituted Black Knight arms and a head on it to, don't know how well you can see it, but whenever they're all put together and primed, it looks like it's supposed to have been a skeleton riding him. It's not that hard of a change to make, to just swap out the arms and head of the rider. Maybe file a few things off, swap a few things out on the mount or the rider. But I don't mind keeping the kind of Sigmar-esque iconography on him because he's dead, right? It's the Death is one army that it's really easy. You can take just about any model from any army, slap some skulls or something on to replace like the head or whatever, and it looks like just a dead version of whatever it was that the Death leaders reanimated. Um, it's not That's not a super cheap way to do it, but it's again cheaper than buying the original models on eBay, and that's how I've done it. I really, like I said, like the Demigryph models, wanted to do something with them. Necropolis Knights are quite powerful. They fit really well into this kind of Death Rattle engine that I built for the prior game. Wanted some for a while, decided to go ahead and pull the trigger on them. But anyways, that's the end of this a bit lengthier video on how to take Death Rattle and either using the models that are currently available from GW and a few relatively simple conversions for yourself to make like a White King, Necromancer mounted, and then maybe a few more difficult conversions, maybe importing some old models, maybe if you have some Tomb King models or are not afraid to pay 2-3 times original retail value, and you don't mind doing that, bringing in a Tomb Herald, Archers, and of course Necropolis Knights. You can make either a really good, with what's currently made, or extremely good kind of engine that will drive your force both offensively and defensively against most opponents to a very high level, very high competitive level for death. So until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.